Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you all today, Healthy Brown webinar on community building. My name is Lok Trong, Assistant Vice President for Campus Life Engagement here at Brown, and I will serve as your moderator for today's session. Given these challenging times, we know you have a lot to be thinking about as you consider your options for returning to campus or engaging with remote learning. I hope you know that staff at Brown cares deeply about your health and safety and will continue to prioritize it above all else. We also recognize that guidelines keeping us safe for the upcoming semester upend the conventional college experience. You understandably want to see your friends, you want to attend symposia, generally be in community with your friends and classmates. We on this webinar, as well as across the university, are committed to making sure that that happens while preserving the safety of the Brown community. The circumstances of the coming academic year will be hard, but we really are looking forward to retaining the core elements and values of the Brown community, whether together in person or virtually. Today, we will address questions regarding student activities and events, identity-centered programming, public service opportunities, virtual and hybrid community building, and much, much more. So again, thank you so much for joining us. We received a large number of questions from students, parents, and families in advance of today's webinar via the registration form. We will try and incorporate as many of those questions in the structured Q&A portion of this session. So thank you for submitting your questions. I also encourage attendees to submit a question to the Q&A tool, and please include your name as well as your class year if relevant. The last note I want to make is that before we introduce the panelists, a recording of this webinar will be available on the healthybrown.edu website shortly after this session. And now I'd like to ask my esteemed panelists to introduce themselves. So let's start with Caitlin.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Caitlin O'Neill. I use she and they pronouns, and I am the Assistant Director of the LGBTQ Center.
Kumar.
Hi, everyone. Nice to be here with you. My name is Christy Kumar. I go by Kumar, and I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I serve as the Assistant Director for Co-Curricular Initiatives at the Brown Center for Students of Color.
Tanya.
Hi folks, good afternoon. I'm Tanya Purdy, Director of BWell Health Promotion, and I use she, her, hers pronouns.
Yolanda.
Hi everyone, welcome. I'm Yolanda Castillo Apolonio. I am Senior Associate Dean and Director of Student Conduct and Community Standards, and I use she, her pronouns.
Julio.
Hi everyone, my name is Julio Reyes. I use him, his pronouns. I am the Program Director of the Undocumented First Year College and Low-Income Student Center, or the UFLi Center.
Betsy.
Hello everybody, I'm Betsy Schimberg. I am the Interim Director at the Swearer Center for Public Service, and I also serve as an Associate Dean of the college, and I use she, her pronouns.
Joey.
Hi everyone, I'm Joey Steele. I use she and her pronouns, and I am Associate Dean and Director in the Student Activities Office.
And Rick.
Hello, my name is Rick Rudnick. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I am an Associate Dean and Director of Residence Education.
Thank you, colleagues. So let's get started with the first question. We received so many questions on guidance and guidelines on events and activities. As you can imagine, students are looking forward to coming back to campus or studying remotely and want to connect with their friends. And so this first question will go to Joey. So can you share with our attendees what the overview of the guidelines for events and activities in the fall, given that there will be some social distance and health and safety guidelines?
Absolutely. So Isabella is going to share a link out. If she hasn't already, it'll be in the chat function, I believe, that will have the overall guidelines. There's a lot of them, and I don't really have time to get into all of them, but I do want to share that we're really excited that at this point, based on current guidance, we are going to be able to allow some in-person community building for students who will be on campus. And we're hoping that that situation stays the same. We're looking at ideally having inside indoor in-person events of 20 people maximum and outside being able to go up to 50 people. That would also require social distancing, face coverings being worn. And for different types of activities, there's different types of requirements. So there's things around performance and things around physical activity. And all of that will be really outlined in that document that, that Issa shared. So yeah, I think that we know that many events will need to be remote. There will be a large number of students not on campus for a multitude of reasons. And so we are going to work really hard, and we did this in the spring as well, to think about how can we shift many things that happened in person to a remote environment and still be able to build that community. And so I think we have a lot of really good ideas. There were some really great things that happened in the spring, like the Ivy Film Festival, for example, and other kind of virtual salsa dancing lessons and things that I think worked really well and translated well. We had a series for student performers that had a great turnout. And so I think we're going to continue to do those things as well. But we're really excited to support this kind of in-person community building. I think one thing to note is that these guidelines are really important. And I think if students can familiarize themselves with them and then ask questions when they have them. I know that many of those questions will come up after this webinar, so this isn't the one time to ask questions related to it. I think that, you know, we've been working with staff from athletics, the SWER Center, and I think any of those departments that recognize student organizations are places that you can go to ask questions. And I think also just remembering that this is really fluid, and we are trying to be as flexible and helpful as possible. And we need students to let us know if we missed anything, right? Because we had students involved in the process, but I think because we have such a wide range of activity with 500 plus student organizations, there may be things that we missed. And so we really just want students to let us know. Or if they think that they need additional support in some way or another, we're really open to having those conversations. But the document that was shared outlines everything, and we're going to continue to add to that.
Thank you so much, Joey. So you brought up the creativity that staff had to do the spring semester when we all had to go remotely. And I want to turn to my colleagues in the centers, maybe start with Kumar and then Julio and Caitlin, to talk about some of the programs that you're able to come up with to support students in building community remotely.
Sure, thanks, Locke. That's the name of the game right now. It's creativity. And I will also focus on like what is grounding about this moment is the process the BCSC uses to bring to life, you know, moments of belonging and gathering are still the same as they were before. They're student-led, they're student-inspired. They come out of moments of struggle. Our center comes out of moments of struggle. So like, strangely enough, it is grounding to know that we're gonna do the same thing and ask our students what they need and support them through that process. So we actually had one of the first heritage series, you know, we have 6 different groups. It's really hard to get them together. And we had one of our first heritage groups all come together and talk about what healing meant in this moment last semester. And it was very well attended. And I mean, we were low-key shocked because we were like, we didn't know if people had virtual fatigue. And they wanted to still engage in that way. And so we have examples that we can pull from where we know that like sometimes we have to back off on virtual and sometimes people want a point of connection. And so we're here and we're ready to be collaborative, adaptive, creative. And so we're just excited about NPC programs, nurturing alignment, heritage series, kind of like the toolkit that we have that I think can really get us through this moment.
Yeah, so I'll speak a little bit. I think for us on our end, it's been really important to also understand like the context in which students are living in and which all of us are living in as well. So really thinking about the programming that we were hoping to do in the spring semester. And realizing there's so much more going on that's impacting our students, their experiences and the ways that they kind of relate to their home lives, but also connect to. I think for us it was still necessary to do, and then what really stood out to us students to highlight their narratives and their stories. So we had a UFLi storytelling kind of project, and we used our social media accounts to amplify that, right? So instead of just using social media as a way to like publicize things, it became a tool to build community and foster connectivity amongst our students. So that was really important, and I think we're going to continue to do that. And as Kumar was saying, was focus on ensuring that all of our programs and initiatives remain student-led, and that we're facilitating connections that are based off of the needs and the opportunities that we're hearing from them. And one thing that I think stood out from our collective work over the spring semester was our kind of ongoing group discussion for queer and trans UFLi students of color that we did in collaboration with the Brown Center for Students of Color and the LGBTQ Center, that I think really stood out as a prime example of the ways that we can still bring students together and have them feel connected to the Brown community and also our centers.
Yeah, just to continue with what some of Julio and Kumar have said, I too was really surprised to see the kind of attendance that we got for our UFLi Cuties event, because there are so many ways in which I understand that students are very fatigued and possibly have been struggling with the change to being remote and having to be on the computer screen all day. But I think one of the things that really came out of that experience for me was realizing that what students were really hungry for, and every student that I've spoken to and other folks as well, is looking for opportunities to just connect with people in a real and meaningful way. And there are absolutely ways to do that on Zoom that don't feel the same as your interactions in your academic courses. And there are definitely ways to do that through other mediums as well. So the LGBTQ Center has a Discord. Many of us also have a weekly, or at least bi-weekly or monthly, depending on the center, newsletter that goes out about different events that we'll be doing and ways to stay connected with us and to have an idea of what center staff members and student staff members are doing. And we're also just open to hearing more from students about what you would like to see and what is going to feel like a positive and an engaging experience for you, what's going to help you to feel heard and seen by the centers and by the university writ large, and just making sure that the work that we're doing is tailored to your need. So please, at any point, I think also emphasizing that we're here. I know it's not the same as being able to walk into an office as easily, but you can always reach out to us over email. We can connect over Zoom. We can connect over the phone, really in any way, shape, or form that makes sense for everybody involved. Just being able to reach out to us and to find that time so that we can work together to start to continue to put together programming and other opportunities and other things that really, again, meet your needs and feel supportive at this time.
Locke, could I jump in here for a minute from the
Yes,
Sawyer
please
Center?
do. I was gonna call you.
Great, thank you. So continuing the theme that Kumar and Caitlin and Julio raised at the Sawyer Center, we were so impressed by how quickly students and our community partners pivoted to continue to provide important engagement for people in the Providence community last spring. Our engagement will continue remotely in the fall. We are currently working with our partners because, of course, we center them and their needs, and as well as students and their needs. So if you have questions about your Sawyer Center engagement, feel free to reach out. We're looking forward to continuing our work in the fall.
Thank you.
I might have a second to share a little bit about what we were doing in the residence halls.
Yes, please.
You know, it was really important for our RPL staff, which are our residential peer leaders, to remain connected to their students. We knew that there was a kind of a sudden rapid change where students had to leave campus quickly. And we wanted all of our RPLs to stay in contact with their residents so that there was at least one meaningful connection, particularly when it came back and forth, you know, with their friends in the community, because we know that that community went back and then became online and was spread out across the world. So we were excited that there could be programs, interactions, you know, set environments where those relationships could continue, and that we did all that we could to make sure that during this very challenging time, our students weren't alone.
Yes, it's important to underscore the collaboration that we had with students during this period, and we will continue to do that in the fall. And so the next series of questions really relate to what life would look like upon return to campus. And I was wondering if, Tanya Purdy, if you could talk about sort of the work that you and your committee is doing around engagement, and that students don't feel like if they're planning to take class socially and being on campus, how can they engage with other folks? And given the guidelines, the healthy and safety guidelines that's in place, what are some of the ways in which you're hoping that students will engage while they're on campus?
Thanks, Locke. I think that my colleagues addressed this a little bit in some of the stuff that they were talking about with the work that happened in the spring and really their hopes for the fall semester. And so what I want to highlight as being core to all of the prevention and education work is that we're looking for ways that people can have social connection while physically distancing. And the physical distance doesn't have to mean that we're lacking in social connection. There are public health guidelines that we have all been working on learning to follow in all of our personal lives, right? Everyone on this panel has had to figure out how to celebrate birthdays, how to experience joy, how to connect with people they love and care about. And those are the things that we're really working to translate, right? So we know what we have to do to stay safe, but we want to share more about like why we're doing it and how we're doing it. And so we will be looking really to students, to faculty, to staff, and to everyone in our Brown family to tell us about why they're doing these things and how they're doing it. What does it look like on campus? What is the lived experience? And so I feel like in some ways I'm not directly answering your question, Locke. I'm sorry about that. But we know what the practices are, right? The CDC has laid them out for us. And each of our states, wherever we are, has told us the things that we need to do to keep ourselves and each other safe. Now is our time to translate that. Now is our time to come together and talk about what that looks like at Brown, what that experience is going to be like, and how we are going to maintain our community, our connection, our bond, and our support for one another while doing all of those things.
Thank you, Tanya. And I wonder, there's a question around, part of coming to campus is meeting new people. Right, and the challenge of remote learning is that you're not able to see that person in person. So, what opportunities will returning students have to connect with other students that they don't know yet? Since opportunities like sitting next to someone in the classroom are removed to meeting new people. I'm wondering if you could share some thoughts, and I open up to my colleagues who might have some thoughts as well too.
I can jump in. I think one of the things that we are working through right now is thinking about how to do things like our activities fair, where I think was a huge place that students got involved and met new people and found out about different clubs and organizations on campus. So we're working through trying to figure out how to do that remotely, but that would still give interaction. And so I think that will look like a mix of a Zoom situation with websites. We're also moving into a new student org platform. So I think we're really excited about the possibilities there. And so I think if students are worried about that piece disappearing, I just want students to know that we're working through that. And so we hope that we'll be able to make sure that we can still let first year students, but also returning students, many of our sophomores are choosing student groups in their second year after going through their first year and kind of seeing what they're really passionate about. So I think that's one way that we're trying on our end to kind of manage that remotely.
Great. Are other panelists would like to share some of their thoughts about how to help students meet students that they don't know?
One of the things that we're doing within the residence halls is thinking about how are we going to build community when a lot of the connections that we have will happen online or within the guise of social distancing, right? So for us, it's about making sure that our staff are well-trained and well-prepared to engage in different ways and different mediums and using different software suites that we haven't necessarily used before for this purpose. And really laying in on community building, asynchronous engagement, and creating opportunities for students to show up and engage in an online setting in ways that they may have traditionally showed up in a lounge or outside one of the buildings and visiting with their friends. And so for us, we know that needs to be something that we really focus on and make sure that everyone knows what those opportunities are. And that includes folks who aren't necessarily here yet. We know that we will have folks who will join our communities in the future. And we want to make sure that folks know that the communities they're going to join and already have some friends before they arrive. because in the end, it's the friends you make in college that ultimately be the most important. And we want to start to facilitate that before folks even get here.
Thank you, Joey and Rick. I know, Joe, you brought up about first year students, and I want to put a plug in that there will be a webinar for first year students this coming Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern time. We received a lot of questions, and I know that there are a lot of participants who are first years wondering what kind of opportunities are there for them in terms of building community if they're not going to be on campus in the fall. And so there's a link that Isabel has shared on the webinar, and please register for that. Some of the questions that we received around sort of how is Brown handling conduct violation, you know, when there are guidelines, health and safety guidelines for individuals and also for the community. How are we handling that? And this question is for Yolanda. And how will social gatherings be effectively monitored? So Yolanda, if you could talk about some of the work that you're doing with your colleagues around that.
Absolutely, thank you, Locke. So really what we're doing is we're trying to set some procedures that we will use for COVID-related type violations of the code. People are coming onto campus, they're making a commitment to stay healthy and safe and to take certain measures. And we need to make sure that we're all holding each other accountable for that. I think what we're really trying to do is keep in line with our values, with our office and what our code typically and our procedures typically are, but have a quicker timeline. So there's nothing in there that's surprising. It's very education focused, very heavy on starting with educational measures and trying to reduce how many hearings we would have to have or where the conduct or disciplinary measures come in. I think in regards to holding people accountable and monitoring, I suppose, that's everybody's responsibility. We've all committed to be healthy and safe. We've all committed to come and to make sure that we're not putting others in danger and not putting ourselves in danger. So really, it's going to be a lot of what the work Tanya is doing in terms of education in teaching people how to approach someone and say, you really should be wearing a mask, or did you forget your mask? Here's one that you can have, or, you know, those kinds of things, so that we're all responsible together for the health and safety of everyone in our community. Also, I just want to highlight and to note, you know, what's important for everyone coming to campus to understand is that students are coming back and they want to engage and they want to have interaction, but we also have staff and faculty coming back, and some of our staff are essential employees, especially in facilities and dining, who have to come back, and that's their livelihood, and really having students think about them as well and their safety. And I know our students care very much about the staff as well, and they've proved that over and over. So I think it's important for them to realize and to think about that connection as well.
Thank you, Yolanda. So I guess the question is what happens when someone doesn't follow the guidelines, the health and safety guidelines. And, you know, I do want to share, in the interest of transparency, that conduct will review situations, as Yolanda mentioned, where group of individuals who struggle to follow the public guidelines that every member of our Brown community would be asked to commit to. So that is not specific to student issue, but the entire community issue. Right? That means staff, faculty, students need to follow the public health guidelines, and that students will not be held in a different guidance than everyone else. So I want to emphasize that we are focused on the restorative justice, a restorative process, and education that Tanya and her colleagues are doing, as well as Yolanda.
Yeah, and if I could just add, absolutely, we are centering education, but absolutely our primary concern is the whole community and the health and safety of everyone. And, you know, some situations might mean that we're removing students from campus, and it will be a quicker process, and we will remove students from campus if they can't follow the guidelines in a way that's creating serious risk to the health and safety of others.
This question, as a follow-up to you know, there are a lot of students that we want to engage in terms of helping us with the education, public health campaign that you and your colleagues are doing, Tanya. how can students get involved in that and sharing their ideas and
Great, thanks so much for asking that. So we just are finishing up our hiring process for 3 positions in the office that students are working on directly related to COVID prevention. When those positions are filled, we're going to be creating systems for providing feedback, for providing information, for providing insight. And so one of the things that's really important to us is that we don't make it hard to get in touch with us, right? Or that we don't just say, oh, the door is always open. We want systems in place, right? Where people know exactly where to go to give us feedback. We also will be immediately responsive to that feedback, and we're holding ourselves accountable to that. And so those will be released very soon. You'll see posts in Today at Brown that will tell you different ways to get involved, different ways to connect with us to provide us feedback or insight. So maybe you just want to give us 1 or 2 notes, but you don't want, overarching involvement in the campaign. That's fine. We want to hear from you. Maybe you want to work with us regularly and be providing insights ongoing. Great. We'll provide all the opportunities for people to get involved and engaged in that way. And so we're really sharing that information based on how our students are sharing with us that that it could reach other students. So we'll start with Today at Brown, and then we'll really work on relying on a lot of the different colleagues that are on this call to be working through how that information gets shared and how we're connecting. The other thing I will just quickly highlight is that, yes, there's opportunities for people to get involved specifically as it relates to COVID prevention, policies, procedures, public health information, but I see us all as interconnected. All of the work that we're doing is addressing this. And so, I think I was just on the phone with Kumar the other day. Julio and I are talking like every other day at this point, I think. And we're looking at those intersections, right? This isn't just prevention education. This is about health disparities. This is about how justice impacts our safety and access to well-being. This is about low-income families and really access to information and without barriers. Right? So it's all of our work. We're all doing this. I think if you want to get involved, you can get involved with any of our offices and find intersection in COVID prevention and in social connection and healing.
Thank you, Tanya, and thank you for bringing up the intersectionality of what is happening with COVID. And so I wanted to ask Julia if you could talk a little bit about the support for low-income students in a time that disproportionately affects them and federal government isn't supporting them and putting them at risk. Can you talk a little about the programs and support that your office has put in place and will continue to put in place for fall semester?
Yeah, so I can speak very briefly to that. We recently just started working with a few of our undergraduate students who'll be working with us over the summer and developing some of those plans. But one of the things that we've committed to at least is ensuring that we're continuing engagement with our students, right? And that includes first-year students in some capacity and way. We do have a first-year transition experience program, but if you're a first-year student, go to our website, look it up. More details to come. But we are thinking about kind of creative ways to build community with students, really think about the different conversations that students want to have about the ways that inequities are being kind of replicated like at home or in other ways, and conversations around health, right? Personal health and health for the family. We're also just in general thinking about the current kind of political climate and context, right? There's a big movement for Black lives. There are a lot of students that we've worked with that are very much interested in that work or are directly impacted by kind of racial injustice and anti-Blackness in the world. So our programming will be very specific and address issues related to Blackness as it ties to and connects with like immigration, connects to coming from a working class family, queer and trans, right? So we're thinking very broadly about kind of intersectionality, but also the ways that our students experience inequities, at home as well, right? Because I think that's become a big issue for a lot of our students, where they're seeing it kind of happening more often. Something else that I'll mention too is that our office is very much connected to some of the other services that provide maybe more kind of resource or direct support to students who might be needing like emergency funding. So within the college at Brown, there's a dean for financial advising and a whole team that's been supporting the EGAP process. So students, please know that while we are supporting you kind of individually one-on-one through advising and maybe having these like conversations about your class-specific experiences, right? Know that we are also working with other colleagues within the college and across the university to really think about the direct research supports that you might actually need next year.
Thank you, Julio. I wanted to turn this next question to Kumar. What Julio brought up is that, you know, we're dealing with one pandemic, but another one came up in the last couple months around anti-Black and racial injustice. And can you talk about the work that you and your colleagues in the Brown Center for Students of Color did during this period, and also continue this in the fall, of supporting our students of color and creating opportunities for them to be in community and to find ways to be part of this movement?
Yeah, I think something that just personally I've been blessed with from the BCSC is an ethic of looking to the past and looking forward and feeling connected to larger movements for justice. We are very much not like, we understand we're part of a microcosm of the larger world. And so during the last few weeks and months now, I think a lot of the staff at the BCSC were even in a state of like, how do we move forward? What do we do? Where is the energy to be creative, I guess, is how we started this earlier conversation. And we looked to the incredible grassroots organizing happening every minute of every day by people hustling to make sure justice is something that's in the near future, right? As opposed to just a past. And we were like, there's so much incredible organizing happening. Let's tap into it. And we wanted to kind of subvert this idea that like we were the recipients of all this like knowledge and we were going to pass it on to students, because we all know that's not true. And we wanted to be in community with students as co-learners. And so we started looking into like social media and seeing all the different organizing that's happening around specific moments. Because, you know, you have different students who are seeking different things from this moment, right? You have Black folks, non-Black POCs, you have allies, you have trans and Black folks, you have a lot of identities coming to the forefront, and you want space to explore what this moment means for you. So we created a virtual justice Google Doc that's kind of a living document where we're posting different events happening internationally. And we're sending you the link to join, hopefully well in advance so you can join. Maybe you can invite some friends who maybe you've been having these conversations. You can join, go to the event together. And at the bottom of each event, there's like perhaps a staff member who's also in attendance. So then we can debrief together and kind of create community as we debrief kind of all this information we just learned, be it like a skills practice event, be it a healing event, be it a vigil, right? And so we're able to kind of like tap into abundant networks for justice in a sustainable way, because the BCSC knows we are going to keep fighting, right? It's not going to end this summer, and we're going to continue to advocate on the behalf of folks who are marginalized, and we know it's the long haul. So we wanted to incorporate a way that created sustainability because we know it's going to take time.
Thank you so much, Kumar. Joey, there are a couple of questions around, as you can imagine, students and student clubs wanting to book spaces for meetings, for gatherings within the guidelines, and also club sports. You know, what facilities are available to them? So can you talk about that a little bit, and how does one book something through the system?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we, because there are going to be such small capacities for events, we anticipate that there will be more events. And so it will be a little bit of a puzzle to try to figure out how to fit everything in. We're hoping that we can do some things on our outdoor spaces to allow for those to be utilized more frequently. And that we know that outdoor events just have, the risk is lower. And so we're hoping to be able to utilize those outdoor spaces as well. Everything will still be reserved with the exception of some buildings who are not in the 25 Live system, but most are. Everything will be reserved to the university scheduler, and they have updated in 25 Live what the new capacities for each space is. So that should be really helpful and easy for students to go in to see what's available, to see what the new capacity is, and to reserve it all in that system. And so we're hoping that will work well. I think that there are not many spaces that can hold more than 20 people or so. And so I think that we'll end up with some events that are smaller and some events that try to get right up to that 20 in the spaces that can hold 20 people with 6 feet of distance in between people. But I think the scheduling office will be doing some notifications around that system and what that looks like. But I do think it'll be easy for students. Club sports is a little bit of a tricky one, and it's one of the areas that we're still reviewing. We know that all physical activity for any student groups, not just club sports, will need to happen outdoors. We're not allowing any physical activity inside, and that's because of ventilation, and that we know that the risk is lower for physical activity outside. So we're still, one of the things that we're trying to determine is whether or not equipment can be shared. So if someone is playing basketball and they're repeatedly touching the same basketball, what is the risk, right? And then are there ways that maybe a team can maybe club, I mean, I think that when we think about the Frisbee team, for example, maybe there's a situation where equipment can be cleaned ahead of time and post, but we need to do a little bit more research and kind of explore what the guidance is, because it's a little bit mixed and we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing to keep students safe. But we're going to do everything that we can to allow students to do whatever we can help them to do safely. And so we will need a little bit of patience as we navigate through all of this changing guidance. But I think that, you know, and club sports ultimately is managed by athletics. And so there is a chance that athletics might have some different recommendations in their spaces. And so we're also trying to just iron all of that out as well.
Thanks, Joey. And similarly, this next question is for Betsy around clubs that do community service, right? And they need to be off campus working with nonprofit organizations in the Providence area. What's your recommendation around clubs that need to do that?
Sure, thanks for asking. So our primary way of making these decisions is around keeping our partners safe and around keeping members of the Providence community safe. And so as a result, we have determined that all engagement with partners for the fall through the SWARE Center will be done remotely. Students will not be leaving campus to engage with their partners. We have set up a tutor management service, a tutor matching service, so that students who are participating in educational activities with Providence school children will still be able to do that remotely online. And also we are working with several of our student organizations to pivot in kind of an exciting way to work with our partners in addition to direct service. When we think about the different tools in our social justice tool belt, direct service is just one of those tools. So this is an opportunity to be working with partners around advocacy, public policy, fundraising, social media. And I would echo what Kumar was speaking to about this moment. This is a moment when I think more than ever, students' energy and efforts can be put to ideas around advocacy, public policy beyond direct service. So that's the plan for the fall. We too have guidelines that will be going up on our website later today, and that can also help student groups understand how they'll engage with the SWARE Center for the fall. Thanks for asking.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much, Betsy. I want to go back to Joey a little bit because we've got some questions with performance groups and music, dance, a cappella theater, which are very much a part of our Brown student activity. So if there's no physical inside activity, what does that mean for those performance groups in terms of them, you know, coming together and doing performances and practicing?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's going to be different for each type of group, and it's going to be different for the groups inside of those categories, right? Because I think we have some groups that have more than 20 members, which means that because of this new capacity number, the whole group can't come together at once, right? And so we're going to need to work through that with them and think about what is possible. We also are requiring face coverings to be worn. So performance can only happen if they can keep a face covering on throughout the entire performance. And so things like wind instruments won't be allowed for the fall, but I'm looking forward to trying to work with students to really be creative around what's possible. And so I know Bill Farber on my team has been thinking about this as well. And so things like dance will need to happen outdoors because we know that physical activity just expels more vapor, and more vapor means more possibility for spread. So yeah, I think dance and things that would qualify as physical activity will need to happen outdoors, but I think there is opportunity for a socially distant performance that maybe gets recorded because they can't have a large audience, but I think we could potentially live stream that, or we could record it and show it later. And so I think there's ways to work through it for the fall. And then we're really hoping that post-fall things get better. And maybe I don't want students to think that this is just like, okay, we made these decisions and that's done. It's really fluid. And if there's any opportunity for us to open things up more and to do more or to increase capacities, we're going to be watching very closely and doing that whenever we can. And so hopefully in the spring, we'll be able to open up a little bit more. And so we really have created these guidelines in a way that we think will keep students safe, but it's not at all set in stone.
Great, thank you so much. The next question I want to direct this to Rick. There are questions around what are pods and how do students choose who they live with? And particularly, in terms of policies around visitors, policy around social connection and hang out with friends in the dorms.
All right, there are a couple questions in there. I'll tackle them one at a time. Where we'll allow folks within our buildings to visit other folks within the building, provided that they are abiding by the rules of social distancing and wearing a mask. I think that's an important part to say. There is a difference, because folks who are living off campus will not be allowed to come in and visit friends in our residential communities. We're doing that because that's in the best interest of keeping our students safe and not bringing anything into our communities that may cause complications. Now, we have rules that inform our use of space within our residential communities. So like very similar, like 6 feet distancing. We have like lounge space that we're restricting how much space can be used within there, because we want everyone to be safe. We want people to be able to engage and interact, but we want that to be done in a way that we know is informed by best practice and the latest information that we have. Now, pods is a concept of kind of narrowing our concept of community. So within a residence hall, you often will have smaller communities that interact. Maybe they're floors, maybe they're wings. What a pod though does is adds another variation to that, where we will have students who will kind of choose to be able to engage each other with a slightly less standard of protection than we would say just general interactions. So that way that they might have a group of 5 to 7 people, I'm not sure the exact number, I use that for examples purposes, where maybe they more regularly would hang out, more regularly associate, engage in more shared activities with face masks and stuff, of course, as well. And students would be able to set those pods, and we also would be helping to set those pods based on engagement, right? And that doesn't necessarily mean it's people around you, right? Like this can be a close group of friends that form a pod that live in different parts of buildings, because we want these to in many ways be organic and to be what they need to be for those students, so that they have a sense of community and social engagement and proximity, so that there's not alone and isolated, so that they do know that there are ways to interact in, I'll say safer, maybe I wouldn't want to say safe, right? Because we all must be cautious in this time of COVID, to be mindful of our impact on others.
Thank you, Rick. The next couple questions, I want to go back to Joey around program houses, and will they be able to host parties, events, activities? What are some of the limitations around that? And then the second part of that question is like, can non-Brown participants attend these events?
Sure, yeah, so one of the things about de-densifying the residential spaces is that all of the kind of previous housing assignments have been shifted, right? And so I know that residential life is trying really hard to keep students together who were in program houses or were in Greek organization. So we're hopeful that that can happen in some way. No, they won't be able to host events in those spaces unless they are in compliance with the new capacities for those spaces, which I think, and Rick, you would know more about this than I do, but those capacities will be low because the spaces are small. And so they will be able to utilize those spaces for things like studying socially distant, right? If there's a few of them in there, or to come together for a very small meeting within those capacities. So they won't be able to host events there, but they will, like every other student group, be able to host events as long as they fall under the guidelines in the document. And that could mean that they could have an event indoor with up to 20 people in a different space that's not a residential area. And then I think your last question was, can guests attend events? For the fall, we're not allowing anyone to attend events unless they are a current member of the Brown community. So that means that students that should be attending in-person events, and remote events is a different situation, but in-person physical events, the only people that should be attending those are students who are in the current semester on campus. So first years, for example, won't be in semester in the fall, so they wouldn't be attending events in person, they would be attending events remotely. And any students who are not remote and local. So that gets a little confusing because there's a lot of different definitions that we're using, a lot of different categories. So, and then anyone not affiliated with Brown will not be permitted to come to events for the fall semester. And we're hoping to revisit that for the spring. We don't know what that will look like then, but for the fall, there's current Brown community and students who are assigned to that particular semester in person.
Joey, are there any restrictions for students to go off campus, to go to the movie theaters, to go in downtown Providence, take the public transportation?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I know, I mean, I can speak to that from the lens of extracurricular activities, and we are not allowing groups to do anything like that. They aren't allowed to, like Betsy said, they're not allowed to go into the Providence community. They're not allowed to host off-campus events. And that really is just because we can't, we don't know how other spaces and venues are ensuring safety, and we don't know that they're following the same guidelines that we're following. And so we are asking students to host anything in person on campus and be registered with us. And so, yeah, and that's again for the fall. I think Betsy and I, you know, have talked about this. We would love to find ways to get students back into the community as soon as we can. But we are going to work really hard to make sure that all of the things that they are really excited and passionate about, and the work that they do is so important in the communities, and these off-campus events are so important to our students to be able to just experience something different than just kind of being on campus all the time. And so we're working really hard to figure out how to do that safely, but we just can't for the fall.
So I know that we've been talking about opportunities for students who will be on campus, but we will have a number of students who will be remote or immunocompromised. And so what are some of the opportunities for those students to engage with the students who are on campus? So I wonder if any, Joey or Tanya or Rick can talk to what are some of those opportunities for students who are not on campus or not able to engage with their peers one-on-one.
Yeah, I think one of the things, you know, we've kind of said to students in the first piece of the on-campus guidelines that if an event can be done remotely and it doesn't lose anything that's integral to being in person, that we really want it to be done remotely for that reason. So we want students who aren't on campus, some by choice, many not, right? We want to make sure that they are able to experience those things as well. And so I think that we will have, we'll have a lot of remote engagement from student groups. And then I know that all the things that the Student Activities Office planned from our programming series will all be remotely offered. And so I think that will be consistent. I think for first years, I know that webinar on Thursday will go into detail on this, but there will be a lot of opportunity for them to engage as well. And so I think Rick might be able to talk a little bit more about if they're thinking about remote engagement, but I'm sure that the centers are as well. And I would love to hear what they're thinking about too.
We absolutely are planning on engaging our first year students who won't be arriving till later. It's important for us for them to have a sense of connection with who their RPL will be, the community that they most likely would be joining, because we want folks to start to get a feel for who their friends are going to be and how they're going to make their way in the residential communities when they get here at Brown. You know, that So some of that might be complicated as we do placement and manage our occupancy, but that is a really strong goal that we have right now, is to make those meaningful connections, so that, thinking about what is it going to be like to come to Brown after everyone has been here for a semester, that they'll be much more comfortable with what that will look like for them and the place that they're going to live, and hopefully have some friends that they've already engaged and have common ground with, that they can begin to acclimate sooner into the Brown community.
Great, thank you. This next question is to Yolanda. What should students do if they feel uncomfortable with behaviors of those around them? And maybe Tanya can speak to some of the education piece as well.
Absolutely. And I defer to Tanya to speak about the education pieces, as she does this work so well. I think that really what we want to focus on is having students be able to express that discomfort. And I think that's something that's hard for all of us to do, especially with our friend groups, to be able to say, this isn't right, this isn't safe, and to have a conversation. So that's really what we want to put in the forefront. But I also think that, we are going to have different mechanisms for them to share that information with us, so that we can address it as well if they're not at a point where they think they can say something themselves, or if they feel they say something and it's not well received or nothing changes. I think that we can really, we're going to have different mechanisms for students to be able to let us know, and we will then have those conversations with the students as well. And work toward sort of figuring out how to best share that information with them.
One of the things that I think is important with students living on campus is that they know what their resources are if they're concerned with another's behavior as it relates to the expectations that we're putting forth as a community. Residential buildings have RPLs and area coordinator staff that are excellent resources that can follow up on concerns to further educate the community about the potential risks involved with behaviors that may be observed, and to be clear and provide clarification for what the expectation is to be a member of that community. And I see that as an important part of community, to be able to have those dialogues and engage. And I know that our staff is very interested in creating places where folks can live, where they feel safe and psychologically secure. And one way to do that is to be willing to have conversations and follow up on concerns.
I will add that, one of the things we're really focusing on is that skill development, so that students feel like they have the skills and the resources they need to be able to address behaviors that, they don't want around them, or that, aren't safe, or that they feel like is in some way directly or indirectly causing harm or risk to the larger community. And so there's skill development there. What I especially want to highlight is that skill development is work that all of us in all of our areas are doing day in and day out. So how to communicate effectively, how to use restorative practices in your day-to-day life, bystander intervention, mutual aid. I mean, I could go on and on. The work that we do in all of our areas is really powerful in helping students develop those skills. What we're going to do is provide more opportunity to learn those skills, but through a population-based public health campaign, we're going to highlight the folks who are using them and how they're effectively doing it. So we're going to tell you those stories. We're going to tell you about the students who intervened, who said something, they were so uncomfortable, they did it, and they felt empowered in the end. Right? We're going to highlight all of those lived experiences. We're also going to highlight what it was like for the person who was told that they weren't following the rules and they had to change their behavior, and how they did it and how they felt more included in the community afterwards. So these are all things I want to say we are focusing on. We're putting a lot of effort into it, but it's not new. We do this, we live this. It's based on evidence. There are best practices in the field that are guiding all of this. And so, you'll hear more about that regardless of, who you're talking to or where you're listening. You're going to see staff on campus who you're going to see them practicing what we're preaching right now. And we hope that you'll see that from your peers as well. So skill development, and then sometimes fumbling through implementation. intervening isn't easy, but we're going to tell those stories too. And we're going to learn and grow together and really become a tighter knit community by doing that.
Tanya and Rick, I wonder if you both can address, are there separate rules of engagement for students, Brown students who are living off campus in Providence?
So I think, you know, there are definitely some guidelines that are the same. And I think that, you know, when it comes to residential specific guidelines, there's guidelines in the residence halls that will obviously look different if you're not living in the residence halls. I do want to say what's really important is to know that we're following guidelines from the Rhode Island Department of Health also. And so the things that they're saying for our entire community in Providence and the state of Rhode Island is stuff that we're going to make sure we're following. We're not going to, through our behaviors, be putting our larger community at risk, right? So I think, you know, if you're not on campus, but still following through on what we're requiring, should you be on campus, you know, checking out the Rhode Island Department of Health site is going to be really important for you. They've done a great job. They have an app up. There's a lot of really amazing information that's easily accessible. So please do, you know, visit that RIDO website and follow those guidelines.
I know those guidelines are really important for us and the work that we're doing in the residential residencies on campus. You know, so whether it's providing our staff with appropriate masks and gloves and things that will inform how we do our work, making sure that our policies and practices are in line and vetted and approved so that the work that we're doing is informed. I think that goes a long way for setting a role model for what we then want our students to do. And we hope then that our staff will be leaders in setting that example. We'll be able to provide encouragement to students when they reach out and have questions or concerns. We'll be able to facilitate dialogue with folks so that they feel more comfortable, maybe engaging behavior from another that might not be what we're expecting within our community. So I'd like to think that as we move forward, these role modeling examples that we're setting will inform both off-campus and on-campus behavior, because our students as a whole will have more capabilities because of the skills that we're working to develop in them. So I would hope that the experience would be similar, but we'll know they're different because one is on campus and one is off.
Great, thank you. We're almost out of time, and there's still a lot of questions in the Q&A chat. So I have two more questions I'm going to ask the panelists, and then we're going to wrap up. The first question is to Caitlin and Kumar. You know, what does support look like for students working in the centers on programming in terms of adapting their work to virtual or following the university guidelines? So Caitlin, if you could speak to that, and then Kumar.
And Locke, you mean students that are working with us as student staff members?
Yes.
Great. One of the ways I actually, we were really worried about how we were going to be, not that whether or not we'd be able to support our students, but what students would need in order to make that pivot to remote work. Because it was already taking a lot of work for people who are only working full-time, but it's a totally different thing when we're talking about students who are working in addition to doing their coursework. And I think what we found is that students across the board told us that what was really important to them was to be able to touch base with staff members regularly. And so being able to meet with students as much as they needed, and being able to gauge their capacities in that way, and also being able to have open and honest conversations about what students need. I think there were days when students were able to be there and 100% in the work. And then there were other times when family life, perhaps other work that they were doing, academic work needed to take priority. And I think just knowing as a supervisor that ultimately it's our job to work with and to serve students. And while there are some really important points around professional development and ways that it is important to be able to work in the world and figure out what that looks like, being a student comes first. And so I'll just say that I'm really happy with the ways that we've been able to support student employees and workers, and also thinking about, in terms of some of the education pieces we've talked about, understanding that the ways in which we're working with our student workers helps position them to be really great student leaders who can kind of take the support that we're giving them and kind of share it more broadly with other student communities as well.
I can just jump in really quick. I echo everything that Caitlin said. We plan to do this by recognizing your humanity. Like, we're in a pandemic. It is not normal. We understand that there is struggle. We understand that sometimes you're screen fatigued. So we have to be really open and honest with our communication. And sometimes it's like, we're gonna do a phone call to check in because I just can't look at the screen anymore. We're also gonna focus on like you as a person as opposed to the event. Right? Like, I think as for programmers, sometimes like even students get really like, what's gonna happen to the event? What's gonna happen to the event? But like, who are you? How are you doing? How are we working together? And like the event will happen, right? And so one of the things that I've learned just like as a supervisor is reframing how we think of productivity. So like asking you to invest an hour as opposed to asking you to get to point B. Because like an hour online might be something different for all of us. So we're gonna be adaptive and recognize your humanity, and that's really all I think. I think that will keep our focus where we need to be.
The only small add-on to that is to provide accurate information in a timely way. That's very helpful with staff navigating these difficult times.
Indeed. And so the last question goes to Betsy, and this is around internships and full-time job searches for students. It's Brown communicating with industry partners, nonprofits, NGOs, and companies who chiefly recruit at Brown. And if so, what is that communication, and how do students stay connected with these organizations?
So I would encourage Brown students who have questions about careers to go to Career Lab. If you have a question about engaging in Providence, come see the Swear Center. And students who are actively enrolled at Brown, i.e. not on a leave, are eligible for student employment and fellowship stipends and internships and all that come with it. I hope that helps.
Yes, thank you so much. So we are out of time. I, from the bottom of my heart, thank my colleagues for joining us today and for their answers and responses and your continued support to our students. It means a lot to us, and we are going to work together coming forward, and we're going to figure this out, and we're going to be excited to have students come back to campus or students who are learning remotely. So I also want to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. I encourage you to visit the healthybrown.edu website for updates, and I wish you well and healthy. Take care.